Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Hoad.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings.
With Neil Forbes. So Neil,
Yes, Julian.
you are one of our very few second offenders.
Yeah. I don't know whether to be proud about that or not. But I tell you what has been going through my mind is that last time when I was here in this seat talking to you guys very nicely and great enjoyment, and I said, these are the things I have a passion about, vultures and veterinary practice hygiene. And they said, what's that about?
We can go nowhere
in that. And here we are, all of a sudden, it is apparently quite, I wouldn't say it's interesting, judging by how many people turned up to my webinar last night, but it's an important point.
What you did a webinar on veterinary practice hygiene?
Yes, last night for Federation of Independent Veterinary Practices.
Fantastic. And how did it go?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It's fantastic. Yeah.
But not a great turnout. No.
Well, no, there was one colleague of mine from South Africa, and there was the presenter and myself, and
one person.
That shows you how that shows you the level of interest in practice hygiene by the UK veterinary profession.
That is absolutely shocking. I didn't know it was on.
It's shocking. It's all to do with the cost of having a cleaner in the practice. All those other places you go into their clinics, they have a cleaner working with gloves, mask, hat on the whole day. Their job is cleaning that practice. And that doesn't happen in UK practices. You use them, they sort of do the best they can and they think that's okay. But it is shocking.
Yeah.
We are worse than South Africa, the Middle East and China.
See, my old practice had a cleaner that came in 5 nights a week for 2 hours, but they weren't allowed to do any clinical areas.
Yeah.
So that was down to the nurses.
And that's fine if the nurses actually have time to do it. But as Jo Dance, who was a famous academic, works in this field, and she said, this is like 20 years ago, she said, as soon as you have a busy clinical environment in a veterinary practice, the first thing that gets forgotten about is veterinary practice hygiene.
Yeah.
It just goes out the window. Everyone's too busy. And I can understand that. We've all been in that situation. But, and that's where expecting a nurse to do it at the end of a busy day actually doesn't really work. Whereas for those other countries where they can afford, because labor is cheap, they can afford to have someone actually going around the whole day cleaning, actually end up with a cleaner environment.
Is that data, does that cross-reference, are there sort of figures that cross-reference that for things like post-operative infections and stuff like that?
I don't honestly know, but I guarantee it'll be correct, and it is shocking. And here we have Great Britain saying it is all wonderful, great profession, blah blah blah, but you just look at the level of interest in practice hygiene. You talk to any clinical director, any practice owner, and say, we don't have a problem, and yet no one is doing positive surveillance.
So pretend for a moment you're not preaching to the converted, Neil, because there are going to be people listening into this who think, our practice is clean. But could you explain what you mean precisely by practice hygiene and how it can affect staff, patients?
Yeah, practice hygiene there are 2 factors to it. One is the level of contamination on surfaces, and the other one is the level of contamination in the air. 75% of the top 20 pathogens in veterinary practice can be airborne. From that point of view, unless you're sanitizing the air space, rather than relying on a nurse to go around with a cloth wiping what she can wipe, you have to sanitize the airspace. That's number 1 point. But anyway, the point is that if surfaces are contaminated, there is a very direct link between that and the level of nocemia infection. And it's published data. If you do everything that you can do to minimize contamination and to improve hygiene, you reduce your nocemia infection rate by 70%. If you 70%, yeah. If you use ATP testing on a monthly basis, and this has been done by at least 4 different authors, they've published it, including the NHS and veterinary, and the NHS has done it over a 5-year period, you will reduce your nosomal infection rate by between 45 and 75%. So if we start off, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about this in due course, but if we start off from the point of view of, okay, you think you've got a clean practice, I can tell you of the 13 practices that I involved in my study, which is now with a journal for publication, and I will be presenting as a clinical abstract at Congress. Of the 13, 1 would have passed and 12 did not. And the average level of contamination, this is level above the threshold which is permitted in that area of the practice, because public area, patient side area, theatre, food prep, it's all a different level. The average level was 14.7 times what it should have been. Horrendously low. Okay. Wow. And yet, gosh, within a 4-month period, by simply giving a single training session of 45 minutes, by introducing what I believe is an optimal cleaning and sanitization process, and by the staff knowing that we would be testing once a month, we reduced that level of contamination by 71%. Wow. So we can prove that practices are dirty. We can prove that they get better. We know from published data that will reduce the nosomal infection rate. And why are we allowing our practices to be so filthy? And if you go back to the point, a lot of people listening will say, hang on a minute, we don't think we have a problem. So what we all do in practice at the moment is passive surveillance. In other words, if we see a wound that's infected, if we happen to notice a patient has got a problem post-hospitalization, we'll do something about it. But what we actually have to do, and again, this is shown by research, publications, we have to use what's called positive surveillance. And that means we put on our consent form, we are a responsible practice. We care about infection control. Help us to do this as best we possibly can for the safety of all our patients. If your patient suffers from any of the following signs, cystitis, GI infection, dermatitis, wound infection, respiratory problems, within 48 hours of being admitting, within a week of being discharged, or within 30 days of surgery, please let us know. Now, as soon as you do that, you discover your nosomal infection rate is 30% higher than you previously believed it was. But the positive point is, as soon as you know it is, you then follow up those cases, you see what the problem was, and you resolve the problem. And the end result is your nosomal infection rate drops by 30% to what it previously was. So, all the science is there. It's not difficult. It's not complicated. It's actually an easy thing to resolve. The problem is that people are not prepared to do it. Now,
so why aren't they prepared to do it?
I think, firstly, they see it as an additional cost. And certainly from a corporate point of view, anything that's an additional cost, they just don't want to do anything about at all. And they still believe that despite, I've tested 13 practices, they still believe their practice is fine. And so what I do is I go along before 8 o'clock in the morning, before the beginning of clinical work, and I do all the tests. I take 50 swabs. This is not the British Orthopaedic Society saying 3 swabs per theatre 4 times a year and don't test anything else is enough. Completely inappropriate. But 50 swabs around the practice allows you to do 2 things. You split those between basic hygiene surfaces, so tables, floors, chairs, reception desk, etc., light over the operating theatre. That's one group. And then you test fomites. So you test taps, door handles, keyboards, telephones, the X-ray trigger switch, the ultrasound handle, the knob that turns the collimation on your X-ray machine, the oxygen flow level on your anaesthetic machine, the percentage isoflurane on your vaporizer.
They're all those things that you turn after you've done something clinical,
exactly,
without thinking of it.
Exactly. And no one stops to think that, oh, whoops, I have actually caused a fomite.
Mm.
And of course, it doesn't get cleaned at the end of that surgery. Maybe at the end of the day, if you're lucky, it might do. And what about biofilms? You know, at any point in time, 85% of the microbes on a surface are in the biofilm. And when they're there, they are 1,000 times more resistant to the effects of cleaning and disinfection. And there's only one veterinary disinfectant company that I know of that does anything about removing biofilms.
And which is
Wow.
that?
Sorry?
Which is that? You're allowed to say?
And health and hygiene. They're the people that I act as a veterinary advisor for on a voluntary basis. But yeah, and, it's just staggering how no one is concerned about the science of the recording, and that's the whole point about using adenosine triphosphate is we are measuring the end result of cleaning. So we go and measure surfaces, and basically it picks up animal protein, plant protein, microbial protein, so bacteria, yeast, not viruses, and biofilms. So basically it tells you if a surface is dirty. Because if it's dirty, sorry, man.
So we're using ATP here as an indicator of life.
Absolutely. Well,
Right.
as an indicator of contamination.
Right.
So whether it's animal protein, plant protein, bacterial protein, yeast protein, or a biofilm, which will include the bacteria, in any of those things, it comes up as positive. That tells us that surface has not been cleaned properly, adequately.
Now, in my
That's exactly
mind,
what the bug is. Sorry?
right, in my mind at the moment, I've got a very vague picture of ATP plus glucose goes to ADP plus energy, etc.
You've lost
It's
me a
the
lot.
other way around. ATP is the end point of it.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's ADP plus
It's good old
glucose.
Krebs cycle again, isn't it? Or the pyruvate
Well, it is,
kinase
yes.
cycle, or the nuke beta oxidation pathway, or any of those coat pathways. That the end result is to triple phosphorylate, and the final phosphorylating nubbit onto an adenosine phosphate compound.
Right.
So in effect, anything that has been producing energy as a basic form of life will be picked up by this test.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And of course, viruses don't have any metabolic processes. They subvert themselves processes, so you can't pick those up. But if it's extremely unlikely that you clean a place so well you get no microbial, no bacterial, yeast, biofilm, or protein.
That's why you don't expect the surface
Just
to
virus.
have a 0 score.
No.
So for example, with a public access area, you're expecting a level less than 100. In a patient access area, it's less than 50. In a operating theatre, it's less than 10, and food preparation less than 10, and ICU less than 25. One thing one has to explain is that, so basically what happens when you do ATP testing is you have Illuminator, which is a handheld machine. You take the swab, you can't send it in the post because that swab has to be tested within 3 hours. So you take the swab, and the swab has a chemical in the top, and you take the swab out, you swab the surface of a 10 centimeter square one way and then the other way, and then you pop it back in, and you can go around the building and you can label them all, and I put elastic band around them for different clinical areas. And then when you come to test it, you snap the handle of the swab has the chemical in. You snap that, chemical goes into the bottom, you mix it up, and you must then measure it within 3 minutes. And that will give you your score. And then I represent that as a multiple of what it should be, of the maximum it should be. And then for the practice, it's represented as an average of all the multiples.
Right.
Right.
So just out of interest, this is presumably as a bioluminescent compound.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's what the handhold, it's called illuminator, and it's measuring that luminescence.
Fascinating.
That shines a light and sees how much reflection it gets back.
And sort of put it into context. I mean, I don't know, you probably got a better idea than I, Julian, how much a microbiology swab is now. I know there are some companies that will do a sort of hygiene measurement around the building, and you take 12 swabs, and it's not as much as it would be otherwise. But an ATP swab will cost you about £2.70. Okay, you need the illuminator, which current cost price, and this is actual cost price from the manufacturers, is like £1,800. So, whoever's going to do it does that. But actually, that then means once you've got the illuminator, you can do 50 swabs, you can do 100 swabs. So if it's a referral practice, I'll do 100 swabs. If it's a basic 3 to 5 man vet practice doing surgeries, I use 50 swabs. But because you're doing so many swabs, you find out where reservoirs of infection are. You can prove where there's bad working practice because taps, keyboards, so on, is being contaminated. And you can even pin it down to whose room that was in. And one of the places I looked at, in fact, 2 of the 13 were places that had only been open for 3 months. And I can tell you, those places are just as dirty as somewhere that's been open for 10 years.
Gosh.
It's just amazing how quickly they get contaminated.
Yeah.
And one of them was a situation where the boss was the orthopedic surgeon, and the practice manager, who was a veterinary nurse, was his wife. And when it came, so, I do all the tests and then organize a staff meeting and get as many members of staff to come as possible. Unfortunately, the orthopedic surgeon didn't come. And what I gathered, it was a situation where the wife was not in a position to tell, and I could prove his consulting room was the worst of the lot. That he was seeing a patient using the keyboard, opening the door, all the fomite creation, and yet no one could actually tell him because, as you would know, Julian, best than anyone amongst us, he's an orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, yeah.
You all know. What is the difference between an orthopedic surgeon and God?
God doesn't think he's an orthopedic surgeon.
Correct.
But there is a true arrogance there, isn't there? There's also a severely blinkered view, because I can tell that orthopedic surgeon will be thinking, well, this dog isn't unwell. It just has a bad joint or bone. So I don't examine it. I'm just examining a clean dog. Doesn't need to wash my hands between every patient because it's not sick. I don't want to pass anything on.
But you see, that's a failure to understand about endogenous infection. Every patient has bugs on their skin, in their respiratory system, in their mouths, in their gut, and so on.
As does every vet, and as does every client.
Absolutely.
I have a shower once a week.
Okay, except for you, Mike. Then.
Yeah.
But talking about the orthopedic surgeon, there was another practice I went to where they had a referral orthopedic surgeon who visited their facility 1 or 2 days a week. And he was so particular about his surgery and being clean that he actually, after he used it, it was cleaned, and then he locked the door and he took the key away with him.
Isn't it?
We actually had, one of these keys that opens every door.
They're called lockpicks.
And we went in and tested it, and it was big.
Oh,
but this is the point. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it.
No.
That is the key point. How many practices around this country are actually measuring the outcome of infection control? And here we have a situation where the RCVS practice standard scheme for small animal hospitals only says that you must measure the outcome of infection control. And you can use either microbiology, adenosine triphosphate testing, or fluorescent markers. But no one can tell us how many swabs or how often, because no one knows.
There's no standardized way, is there?
There isn't. But, at least my paper, when it comes out, will actually show that, okay, I can't guarantee that, I'm using 50 swabs. If you use 5 swabs, would that be enough? Well, I don't think it would be at all. I mean, what I've always suggested is you use 50. Once your facility's multiple has come down to maybe 2 or 3 above what it should be, sure, cut it down. Use 25 a month. But one of the points is you have to keep doing it once a month. We have to get away from this concept of, you're going to have your RCVS inspection once every 3 years. We'll tell you when they're coming 4 months in advance, and we'll just give everything a good clean and get the paperwork in order. We have to get to the point where actually every month the staff know. They don't know when, but they know that it's going to be tested. And that's the way of...
Might I suggest that if you do drop 50 to 25, then you've got to randomize your swab taking, because otherwise you don't think, okay, the telephone was dirty last time. Extra special attention to the telephone, and then swab back. Good, that's clean. And you completely ignore the lump of dog poo on the counter next to it.
One of the very nicest things out of my survey that came out of it was that 3 of the practices afterwards approached me and said, Neil, the very, very best thing about the whole of this is, for the first time ever, my staff are taking a pride in the infection control in my veterinary facility. They've never done that before. And
That's
the
great to hear.
because it's measured and the results are shared with them, they know it's good. And half of the practices who took part did so because they wanted to use their infection control results to promote to their clients. And here we are at a time when the veterinary profession is, having a rough time. And one aspect is there is potentially a really good veterinary story to come out of this. If any corporate or group of practices, or maybe the Federation of Independent Veterinary Practices said, look, hey, we are different. We are maintaining our practice hygiene at a level as good or better than human hospitals. We are measuring monthly. We've got our levels down, etc., etc. And that lovely green sticker you get on the front door of the restaurants, the kebab shop, the fish and chip shop saying food hygiene?
Oh,
Absolutely.
environmental health thing.
Yeah, 3 out of 5. They're the ones to go for. Definitely. The Russian roulette of the kebab shop. Yeah.
That closed one of our Indian takeaways down around here.
Yeah.
Because they got a rating something like 1 out of 5. Yeah. They got slated on Facebook. Everybody piled in, and they basically had to shut down.
Can you imagine if that happened to a veterinary practice?
Absolutely.
What, people piling in on a veterinary practice?
No, shutting it down. But no, this is seriously what we're aiming to do with the Bella Moss Foundation, is to actually introduce a national veterinary clinical hygiene award system,
right?
Where we will actually have a network of nurses around the country who can, and it'll be a paid service, and a practice can pay, and the arrangement will be that a nurse will come unannounced one morning before 8 o'clock in the morning. It won't be a Monday or a Tuesday of a bank holiday. In other words, we'll make sure it's a day when it has been cleaned properly the night before. That sounds an awful thing to say, but it's important. And what we would love to do is have a situation where, just as you expect to see the food hygiene rating of your favorite Indian restaurant, so we would expect the clients walking into a veterinary practice to actually look for and be able to see the hygiene rating of their veterinary practice. And this is a scientific, data measured, quantitative measurement of the hygiene in that facility. And I think that would be a real step forward, a massive step forward. And I think as soon as my paper is published, and if I can convince the RCVS that actually, yes, this is a way, firstly, we can show that the practice isn't clean. Secondly, we can show them how we can get it clean. And thirdly, we can have a public-facing sticker to tell the public that this is a clean veterinary practice. Wow, that would be
a great idea.
That's a real positive, isn't it? Because
absolutely.
It's converted into
it's a good news story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Initially you could perceive it that it's sort of slightly vet bashing. You're all dirty, you're all filthy, and you charge too much, and it's all very negative.
But that's only the case if the practice hasn't done it. And you know what? If they haven't done it, there will be enough publicity about it. There'll be enough papers published, lectures given, etc., to state that you can achieve this.
Yeah.
A, you can measure what your hygiene is, and B, you can do things to really radically change it. And yes, those dissenters will say, how do we know we reduce underserved infection rate? But there are, as I say, at least 4 papers published giving data of if you do this longitudinally, of a 45 to 75% reduction in no-salmonella infection rates. And
that program's coming out of the Bella Moss Foundation, isn't it? The hygiene, because the story of the foundation is very much, well, that's serious cross-infection, wasn't it? Because that was HMRSA, wasn't it?
Those infections happen. Yeah. And that it's a sad reality. Someone signs a consent form and says, yes, I understand there's a risk involved in my animal having an operation. and then something terrible goes wrong and the animal gets MRSA, has a leg amputated, whatever, or sadly worse, it dies. And they go back to the practice and say, well, this shouldn't have happened. And the practice says, well,
you signed the form, you knew the risks.
Yeah, but that with the Belamos thing, that went one step further, didn't it? Because the Bella, the dog, contracted MRSA at the vet practice, brought it back home and infected Jill Moss, the founder of the Belamos Foundation. And it was only when she had to go to hospital and they started doing swabs and scans that they identified that it was the same infection that had infected and come from Bella. I think it got tracked down to one particular practice.
Yes, I mean, that's not surprising, but this is absolutely the point, that if a veterinary patient gets infected, that patient goes home and is a reservoir for other pets in the family and humans in the family. And remember that animals that have MRSA, generally they have all contracted it from humans, and that it's only a transient infection in an animal. And let's just remind ourselves about MRSA in our staff. If you do a survey of human tonsils, you will find between 28 and 39% of everyone has MRSA in their tonsils at any point in time. So for heaven's sake, don't test your staff, but instead assume that every member of staff has MRSA.
Yeah.
Therefore, anyone who walks into a theatre can only do so if they put a mask on. Okay, hat, gloves, overalls, and theatre shoes as well. But I'm not just talking about those that go in at the time of an operation. No, someone who pops in to get an instrument out of the theatre. Yes, if you do nothing else, for heaven's sake, put a mask on. Absolutely essential.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that cleaning surfaces, cleaning touch points is one thing, but cleaning the air is another. Now, how do you recommend doing that? I mean, there are various bombs, aren't there? That you can.
Okay. So let's start from first thing to point out is that post-COVID, internationally the human health experts actually came to the conclusion that the most efficient, the cheapest, and the most successful way of sanitizing in an area, a room of any type, was fogging it. So you create a mist of disinfectant. And there are, obviously, we all know there are products that you can use to create a mist in your operating theatre, for example. And that's fine. A lot of these are peroxide type preparations, fairly nasty chemicals, but they do a very good job in that situation. But of course, they cannot be used if staff or patients are in the airspace. And so from my point of view, if you are talking about disinfecting a veterinary facility, you have to have a product that has got safety certificates so that if it's used by fogging, it is safe for patients and for staff, and that also it is efficacious by fogging at the concentration that is used in the fogger. And so this is the whole point, going back to what Joe Dance said, when you have a busy clinical situation in a veterinary practice, the first thing that gets forgotten about is practice infection control. Because the nurse has got to remember what to wipe and also the little crevices and crannies that no one is going to be able to wipe. Fogging achieves that. Now you can go into a room with a fogger. So there are a number of different ways of fogging. You can have a compressed air fogger. You can have a electrical plug-in fogger. You can have a battery fogger. You can have a petrol fogger. You wouldn't normally have a petrol fogger in this country, but I've always used an electrical plug-in or a compressed air. You fill it up. Obviously, your disinfectant has to be fogger friendly. In other words, it cannot corrode metal because the working parts inside a fogger will disintegrate and rust up and block. You can get a commercially available product called a poultry house fogger, and that will normally produce particles between 5 and 10 mu, which is absolutely fine for fogging. And you just fill it up with your disinfectant, you plug it in, and you can fog a room that is 20 meters by 30 meters in probably 2 minutes. It's way, way quicker than wiping things with a cloth. So people have to remember that cleaning and sanitization is a two-step process. So these people who just think using one chemical, which is a combination of a detergent and a disinfectant, simply doesn't work, because organic matter inactivates disinfectants. It has to be a two-step process. So the first step is you clean the surface, and whether that's warm water and soap, very liquid, whatever you like, or whether it's a detergent and a disinfectant, it doesn't matter. Either of those options, fine. You do that, wiping the surfaces, but then the terminal disinfection should be by fogging. And I say that does not take a lot of time. It is that there are products out there that have got the safety and efficacy certificates to prove that that's okay. If you have a member of staff who has asthma, yes, they might want to wear a mask whilst they're doing it, but otherwise it's absolutely fine. And this is a technique that I have used in my hospital for more than 10 years. So it's not difficult. The technology has been out there for a long, long time. And this is the point. 75% of the top 20 pathogens in veterinary practice can be airborne, including Brucella canis and chlamydia and all sorts of other things. So, I think the key points really are every practice needs to have an infection control champion. You remember the old matrons, infection control matrons in hospitals? Well, we need to have one of those, and they must have the personality and the clout to be able to stop everyone and say, "Oi, what are you doing? Why have you touched that dog and then done that without washing your hands?" They've got to be able to say that, because if they can't, there's no point.
Don't you know who I am?
So you've got to have that person.
Oh, sir, what's the bleeding time?
You've got to have staff training.
It's a fracture. I can fix it.
Now then. So you've got to have the staff training, and you've got to measure the outcomes. And the absolutely key thing is every member of staff in the building has to be on board. And the key thing for me about doing these staff training sessions, and I've done lots of them, is you don't tell them what the solutions are. One of the first things when I set up the BVNA infection control course with Louise Adoin and Sam Mitchell, and the first thing we got anyone to do on the course was to draw a diagram of your building, put in every door, every wash basin, and annotate the corridors as clean, dirty, or intermediate. So, and as soon as you do that, there are a number of key points. One is there can be no room in which you can touch an animal where you cannot wash your hands before you open the door. Sounds very obvious, but it's amazing how often you've got it wrong. Then another key thing is, okay, what happens in the process of someone booking an appointment and coming in to see you? Does the receptionist ask what's wrong with the animal? And does any member of the household work in a healthcare sector? Because the simple fact that anyone in the household is in the healthcare sector, that animal has a greater risk of MRSA. Just the same as any patient of yours, if you meet them, just meeting them and saying, "Hello, Fido," in the post office, you give that dog a greater risk of MRSA, because you, as a healthcare professional, carry that risk with you. Exactly the same way as your staff's animals who come into the staff room at lunchtime and get cuddled by your staff have all got a higher risk of MRSA. So what you need to work out is, if someone phones up and says, "Yes, my pet has got diarrhea, it's got a cough, it's got bad skin," it should never come into reception. It should stay in the car park. It should then be met by a member of your staff who escorts it through the back of the building into an isolation room. The diagnostics and treatments should be done in the isolation room. The isolation room should then be sanitized, and the animal leaves. How many practices does that happen in? Think about admitting patients in the morning. How many people separate their elective surgical cases from their medicine cases?
I can't think of a single one.
People don't.
What about raw feeding?
Sorry, raw.
My practice I used to work at, we would always ask whether the patient was raw fed.
Oh yes, no, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean,
because patients that are raw fed have a a massively
Abs-
higher risk
Absolutely,
of
absolutely.
MRSA
And
passage.
this is one of the key things. And thanks so much for bringing that point up, because I'm a trustee of the Bell and Moss Foundation, and we are launching at BSABA this year a new set of infection control guidelines, and we've got them for clinical areas in the practice. We've got non-clinical areas in the practice. We've got them for staff training. We've also got some for the public. One of the ones for the public is exactly these points. If your pet is raw fed, do not feed it on raw for at least a week before it comes in, because we don't want that problem in our facility. And so it's a guideline specifically for an owner to say, what can you do before your animal goes in for surgery to minimize the risk of it creating a problem or coming home with a problem?
Mm-hmm.
So, and all these documents from the Bell and Moss Foundation are free of charge, lots of information to try and help practices do the job better. But all I would say is there needs to be an appetite for an awareness on the part of the practice that they actually need to do it better. And that's where I think the hygiene sticker on the front door is actually going to be the winner. Because I think it's only when we get to the point where the client expects to see that hygiene sticker, and if they don't, they say, "Oi, where is your biosecurity policy? And can I please see your last set of results for your hygiene testing?" And at that point, practices are suddenly going to turn around and say, "Whoops, I think we ought to be doing this."
So, Neil, you've talked a lot there. Expensive fogging, testing, bioluminescent testing, lots and lots of expense going out from the practice.
No.
But what would be the cost of not cleaning and testing?
Well, I'll answer your question first. Massive. I mean, if you've got clients going home with infective problems, that's massive. And I think nowadays we have to think about this whole question about trial by social media. The sad reality is that if you get a client who goes home with an infected wound after surgery, or they've got cystitis, diarrhea, respiratory infection, or whatever, the problem is at the moment, probably most clients don't actually twig that it's a problem they picked up in the veterinary practice. But if they were to, and they get on social media, the damage that can do to you overnight in terms of your client load and so on, it's enormous. So
I think that's what happened to the local takeaway.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that is the cost. In terms of what is the cost of doing this stuff, what's the cost of a fogger? 170 quid?
Right.
They'll probably have a lifespan of about 3 years. Then you'll have to change it. What's the cost of fogging with disinfectant? Well, it's no more expensive than using a disinfectant. What's the cost of using a biofilm remover? Very, very cheap. Once you've cleaned the practice, you're only going to do it when you do a deep clean, and that will be once or twice a week, depending on the area that you're doing it. Testing, I can tell you that if you took, let's say, the 3 to 5 vet practice where you were using 50 swabs every month, if you work that out, so as I said, there's the capital cost of buying illuminator and then the cost of the swabs. If you work that out over a 5-year period, it would cost you £160 a month. Now, in terms of the monthly,
that's not a huge amount of money, is it? But bearing in mind that how much would a practice charge to treat a wound infection?
Well, you've got a better idea than me, but you put 3 noughts after it.
Yeah, but actually, it's not a good charge to make if you've been the cause of that wound infection, is it?
Absolutely.
And so I suspect a lot of practices undercharge to treat wound infections because they think, I can't charge the full amount because I've caused it, but they still have to charge something. And so they're losing money on that. If they don't have the wound infection in the first place, they're saving money. But I think also there's the cost of sorry, I was just thinking of the cost of staff sickness, because all we've spoken about at the moment is wound infections. But actually, now I think there are figures published. I can't remember where I saw them. I think there's figures published for at least guesstimates of staff illness due to poor hygiene in veterinary practices. More so in large animal practices because of the very nature, from what I remember. But do you have any information on that?
I don't, I'm afraid. But I think it's it is significant, and it's not just the cost. we're not talking about the cost of getting the locum
I
in.
was merely talking about cost because you mentioned cost of testing. So I was thinking of, what's the cost of not testing?
I think the truth, whether you get a locum in or you get a trainee to do a qualified nurse's job or whatever, the cost is also the effect it has on your continuing clinical service.
Yeah.
So, personally, I think it's massive.
Well, at the moment, we're not really required to tell people how good we are, how successful the practice is in any way whatsoever. There's no quality assurance.
No. There's one or two things, as you would know, about your anterior cruciate success thing is now a lot of people sign up to get that documented, which is fantastic.
Yeah, the cruciate registry.
And I think the sad reality is that most owners, they know the reception area, they know the consulting room, they know nothing behind that at all.
Well, by the sounds of it, it's a good job.
Well, if they walk through it, they probably wouldn't recognize things. But I think the other point to bring up is just why is this such a problem now? Why is it important? And of course, the answer is because of antimicrobial resistance, because we cannot use prophylactic antibiotics, and this is why. The day of let's not care about it being really terribly clean because actually we'll just give us some antibodies anyway, that is over.
Yeah, I remember when I saw practice many years ago, it was very standard practice to be super sterile for an orthopedic op, and that meant you do it before you did all the other ops, but probably using the same kit. But you get a little bottle of Pembriton, wouldn't you? You take the top and you sprinkle the Pembriton powder over the wound.
Yeah. I know, but I think so. Why is it so important now? Because we can't use antibiotics, and this is, as I said, eat your heart out, Dr. Fleming, the inventor of medicine, and welcome back, Florence Nightingale, the person who introduced carbolic soap to military wards in the Crimea War, but that is the real point that people have to realise that cleanliness should be next to godliness. We actually have to be concerned about really getting our facilities clean and taking that pride, which I mentioned before, in knowing that they're clean by measuring them. And I say that cost, is really not a lot of money for the reassurance, not just you and your staff, but to your clients, and to be able to promote it to your clients. And I know there are one or two practices out there that are actually putting on their website their monthly adenosine triphosphate, all microbiology test results. And that I think is the way forward. Let's shout about the things we're doing well, do them well, and then shout about it.
Absolutely,
and use it as a marketing tool.
Do you remember Eddie Izzard?
Sorry,
her? Yes, I remember
Eddie Izzard?
Yeah.
Didn't he have a sketch called "Cake or Death"?
She yes, Cake or Death.
Cake or Death. So this is test or death.
Cake, death. No, I mean cake. Sorry,
we're out of cake.
Yes. Oh, so the choice is or death, is it?
Yeah. So really the choice is test or death.
Test or death, it is. And actually, it really is death. So you spoke about antimicrobial resistance, and our regular listeners will know that we've harped on about this ad nauseam because it is so important.
Yeah.
And just to put some sort of context on, in 2019, the World Health Organization, which, just as an aside to our American friends, this is what Trump isn't going to be funding anymore. So you're all going to die. Sorry. So the World Health Organization in 2019 estimated that there were 1.27 million deaths directly attributable to antimicrobial resistance, and a further just under 5 million deaths in which antimicrobial resistance had contributed to those deaths.
And one other point from that same paper is that more people died of antimicrobial resistance than the total number of people who died of AIDS and malaria put together. And I think that puts it in context very nicely.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, more of a problem.
Described by Dame Sally Davis, who's medical director in the UK, as the silent pandemic.
Indeed. And so, apologies again to our regular listeners for banging on about this, but actually, it really needs to be banged on. We don't use, as Neil said, we don't use prophylactic antibiotics before. Now, those are antibiotics that we use for just dish out ad infinitum. As recently as 2 or 3 years ago in most practices, hopefully not anymore in any practice, he says, really hopefully, we'd use them because it probably helped, because we thought, well, these are cases that have a risk of getting infected. And now we realize they only have a risk of getting infected because we were so poor at aseptic technique, sterile technique, and at cleaning practices. There, off the soapbox.
But we're getting better. Guys, we've talked about this for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. Neil.
Several minutes, you mean?
Several
More than
minutes.
1 minute.
I was
Multiples
gonna say,
of a minute.
yeah, multiples of minutes. I was wondering, Neil, do you remember? I can't remember whether we had the feature on the show the last time you were with us, but do you remember the feature of the show called 60-second CPD?
I know what you're talking about, Michael. Yes.
Well, it just occurred to me. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I better get my clock ready, hadn't I? Okay. I don't know for sure whether you could actually summarize what's taken minutes and minutes and minutes, lots of minutes to talk about.
Some key points in 60 seconds.
So do you reckon you could do that?
I'll go for it.
Hang on a minute. You're not just jumping in. We're not having any of this, I'm going to jump in raw. So you're up for the 60-second challenge. So what are you going to call it?
I'm going to talk about veterinary practice hygiene.
Veterinary practice hygiene. Okay, right. So Dr. Neil Forbes, 60-second CPD challenge, veterinary practice hygiene, 60 seconds, starting now.
The somal infection rate in veterinary practice ranges between 2.8 and 9%, but increasing to 32% for some surgical cases. Sanitization has to be a two-step process, meaning cleaning first and disinfection second. Remember that 75% of new infectious human diseases come from animals. That's why we must control infection in veterinary practice. And 75% of the top 20 pathogens in veterinary practice are air spread. That means you must sanitize the air space, and the only way to do that effectively is by fogging using a safe and proven effective disinfectant when delivered by those means. Remember, if you're not measuring infection control, you can't manage it. By reducing the surface contamination levels in veterinary practice, we reduce the nosomal infection rate by 45 to 75%. That is really, really important. And if you do everything you can to prevent nosomal infection, you will reduce it by 70%.
Wow.
Incredible. And there we go. Perfect. The timer goes off. Excellent.
Wow.
Excellent. Again, as I say, we don't really apologize for repeating these things because it is so incredibly important. Just a couple of questions. Again, one about air hygiene. Now, I was in a practice recently that installed high efficiency HEPA filters throughout the practice. And that seems to me like a very good idea.
Sure. I think the first place, sorry to interrupt, but the first place you need to start is the basic principle about air hygiene. And what that means is that you have to draw clean air into the cleanest parts of the building. So clean air should be coming in through a HEPA filter into the theatre. And air should be extracted from the dirtiest places, so the laboratory and the wards. So dirty air is going out of the ward, out of the building, rather than coming back towards the clean areas. And if you start off with that premise, and then remember this whole thing that we talked about before, about not only air flow, but also people flow, remembering, when someone touches an infective animal, where do they go to? And in essence, we should, there's some basic principles. Only people wearing clean clinical shoes should be walking in clinical areas. When staff arrive at the practice, they should arrive from home having showered and washed their hair. They don't stop and clean the horse or feed the poultry on the way. They arrive at work, they change into a clean uniform, they put on their clean clinical shoes, and they don't contaminate it during the day. Let me just talk about two real major contamination issues that we've all done wrong. Firstly, the veterinary nurse restraining an animal to have an intravenous injection. What do? They hug it against the chest. against their uniform. Yeah?
Yeah.
And how many animals are they hugging in a day? 20, maybe?
Lot of hugging.
Well, it's all about puppies and kittens, isn't it?
And how much infection are they therefore transferring from one patient to the next? And when I've started to discuss this in practice, they said, well, it would be ridiculous to wear an apron. And what on earth do they do in human hospitals? Well, there is a written protocol. Before you touch a patient, before you have physical contact with the patient, you have to put PPE on. So no, it's not so unreasonable to expect people to do that. So that's it. Now let's think about the vets. As a vet, we finish consulting, we lift the Labrador from the table onto the floor. Oh, whoops, we've just hugged it against our tunic. We open the consulting room door. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Lovely to see you. See you again next week with Fido. And we've contaminated the consulting room door with our dirty hand. We then go to the keyboard and we write up our notes. We go to pharmacy and we put up the drugs. Then we go back into the consultant. Oh, sorry, no, before that. After we've walked out, after the patient's gone out, we spray the table with disinfectant and we wipe it down with a paper towel. And then we turn and we type up our notes, get our drugs. Then we might wash our hands if we're lucky. Now, there are a number of things that go wrong. We contaminated the door handle. I don't mind if you do that, as long as you appreciate you've done it. And at the end of your consulting shift, you sanitize that handle yourself. But apart from that, every time before we touch an animal, after we touch an animal, before we put gloves on, after we take gloves off, after we get any contamination on our hands, we must wash our hands. We know it is the single most important thing that you can do to minimize the risk of transferring infection around a building. So, okay, we fouled up with the door. Coming to the consulting room table, what did we do wrong there? We sprayed it and we wiped it off. Now, okay, it's good you wiped it off because you're wiping off the dirt from the dog's feet. We all know you wipe off that table, there is a whole lot of dirt on the towel. But what it means is there was no contact time for the disinfectant. So if you want to do it properly, fine. Spray the table, wipe it off, then spray it again and leave it wet. Then wash your hands, type up your notes, do your drugs, come back, look at your notes for the next patient. If the table's still wet, I personally wouldn't worry because I would say that's a message and I'll explain to my patient, that's because I care about the health of your animal and I have disinfected this table properly. But just simply that single point of the vet, not just wiping it, but spraying it again to get the contact time. They've cleaned the organic material off, then they've got the contact time to disinfect. If every vet in the country just did that tomorrow, that alone would make a major difference. But these are the simplest little things. This is just touching the surface, but they're things that we have all done wrong. I mean, people of our generation have done it wrong for decades. I'll put my first put my hand up and say I've done it wrong, but I know better.
And we have the excuse that there wasn't the evidence base then. There wasn't the spread of knowledge. There is no excuse now.
No.
I do get. I mean, I'm very much OCD about cleaning. I think it's because I used to work in a virology lab. Yeah, I'm sure it is. But yeah, I do that. I do those touch points you talk about. I work on the premise that dirty. I've touched something. Dirty. Got to be clean. I don't do it so much at home. I haven't got that OCD going through to my personal life, but at practice.
But at least you had the experience of working in the virology lab with talks to that. 99.9% of veterinary clinicians do not have that experience.
No.
Well, we got this when we were working in COVID, didn't we, as well?
Yeah.
Because, Julian and I were working as the vaccinators. And initially it was, oh God, I've got to do this. What now? How? And it was a bit of a pain to get into the routine of constantly washing your hands, preparing the files, etc. And you'd sort of stop and you go, no, this is not right. Back into the protocol. And after a couple of sessions, it was almost sort of routine, wasn't it? And you'd point out to your colleague that they've just forgotten to wash their hands.
I think how different that is to how, unfortunately, how people behave in veterinary practice.
I see
who
it all the time.
And who tells them any different? Are you taught these things at university? No.
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 Are the nurses taught? Not to that
No.
level. It's a complete blind spot for the profession.
I was in a practice last
And
week,
yeah.
and I was there doing training, and we got a lovely lecture suite upstairs, and it was all very, very nice. But I had to pop into theatre to pick some stuff up first. And I got lost, wandered through X-ray, in through a consult room, and somebody came to find me, and they came in the other way. And basically, two people walked straight through the operating theatre in the uniform or the outfit that we were going to have just for our teaching session, tucked away upstairs.
Talking about uniforms, there's a really interesting thing that I picked up going through a pretty modern, well-run hospital down in Wiltshire, where I was visiting. And you think about the different wards. You have an oncology ward. Now, the point was that the floor of each ward is a different colour, and the uniform of the nurses is a different colour. So, the fundamentals of oncology, high risk of being infected, but low risk of there being contamination there. Elective surgery ward, high risk of, it should be clean, but a high risk if they get infected. Then you've got the children's ward and the medicine ward, where obviously there's a high risk of infection because of the nature of the patients. And the whole point in this hospital was that different nurses from different wards wore different coloured uniforms, and the floor in each ward was different. And that meant that a nurse who worked in oncology couldn't then go and visit their child in the children's ward at lunchtime. And not only was it different, but it reinforced to the staff the whole time through the day that they were that type of nurse. That's where they worked. And I love a situation where in a veterinary practice you had clean nurses and dirty nurses. And
Mike, clean up your act.
Sorry.
Clean patients were managed in a different way to dirty patients.
Gotta love a nurse.
A different
Absolutely.
ward, etc. That is how it should be. And it's interesting. I was lecturing in China a few months ago, and I met with one of the Veterinary Association directors, chairman of the association in a province. And I was doing a course, I was lecturing on avian medicine, but also on veterinary practice hygiene. And I had a meeting with him afterwards. And he was asking me quite seriously, from a Chinese point of view, how would I change things about designing veterinary practices in the future to now? And, one of these key points for me was you separate your patients into different wards of different risks and manage them separately. And they're going to do it.
And that's great. I guess to play devil's advocate, it would be too expensive, I think, for
most people.
For most people in this country.
Yeah,
but it doesn't need to be that complicated to have good aseptic technique.
Absolutely.
And I actually changed it from good aseptic technique to excellent aseptic technique, because there's either no aseptic technique or there's excellent aseptic technique. And it only is good, because good is bad then, isn't it? So that it's a quantal thing. You either have aseptic technique or you don't.
Yeah. But whilst you say, it's too expensive to do all of that, I would honestly suggest if you're talking about a university hospital or a referral hospital, actually they should be doing that. If you've got a whole load of dermatology cases or gastrointestinal cases or cystitis cases or respiratory cases, they shouldn't be in the same ward as elective surgical cases.
No. Agreed.
Interesting.
I'm gonna just move very, very briefly from hygiene, because
I'm not asking you the difficult question.
Well, I was going to, because I don't think we asked Neil the difficult question last time, did we? And it's something that we normally ask now for our new guests. We normally ask a really difficult question, and I'm actually going to ask it this time.
What's the we in this?
So what's
we ask?
We ask the question.
Yeah,
you never ask the question.
No, I do.
Oh, you don't?
Well, no, I don't. No, I don't. I haven't actually asked the question per se, but I've suggested that you ask the question before many times. Yeah. So
off you go then.
There we go. Do you know the difficult question? Is to get a little bit under the Neil Forbes skin, really.
Go on.
I'm gonna ask it. Okay.
Go on.
I'm actually gonna ask it this time because Neil, I haven't actually felt able to ask this question before. I felt very nervous about it because I think Mike has a greater empathic nature than I do in terms of asking this question. But I'm going to come straight out with it. Here we go. I'm going to ask the question. Neil, we met before. I feel we've shared a few heartfelt moments. And I feel able to ask you this question. And please, look, forgive me if I ask it incorrectly. What's your favourite bread?
Bloody hell, he asked the question.
My favourite bread is the bread I make myself, actually.
And
it could be a granary flour with pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, and one other seed. Anyway, that's what I do, and it's jolly nice, thank you.
Excellent.
Wow.
Excellent. Now, so is that full granary, or do you do a mix of granary?
Yeah, full granary, but with all the seeds going.
Yeah. Nice. So is that the standard 500 gram flour?
I normally do.
You use 600, do you? So what about 370 mils water, 10 grams salt, 15 grams of yeast?
I put a little bit less salt in, just because I'm trying to be healthy.
No, okay. And in fact, putting a bit less salt in could help raise the yeast. Salt is a limiter on yeast fermentation. So other than adding flavour, you put a certain amount in so it doesn't overrise and cause air bubbles. So with granary, that's not a bad thing.
I've got Master Chef here.
Yeah, well, next time you guys visit, I will make sure I make some fresh, and you can have that with some of my, some of my favorite things on it will be smoked trout pate.
Oh, lovely.
Smoked by myself, made by myself. Or the other one is avocado and peppered mackerel with horseradish. I just love that.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Do you hot smoke or cold smoke?
Hot smoke. Yeah.
On the barbecue outside.
No, I've got a smoker. I've got a proper fish smoker. Catch the fish locally, and they're in the smoker the same day.
Wow. So hickory, oak, apple, or a mix?
I got a bit of a mixture, but it's usually apple, sometimes mixed with a bit of beech or hickory. Yeah. Very nice. And of course, where I live on the west coast of Scotland, mackerel is another great, wonderful fish, and have fresh mackerel and then be able to smoke that and make pate from that. Just
one of my favourites, smoked mackerel. I can see I get this sort of itch on the side of my neck when I feel Mike's eyes are boring into me because I'm going down a rabbit hole that we just haven't got time for. I feel we wouldn't have spent enough quality time with you if I hadn't asked you about this recent vulture operation.
Was there anything new to tell you about my vulture?
Yeah, that's
what he's asking you.
Okay. All right. So the one thing that I have got to share with you, and you will know probably far more than I do about stem cell therapy in dogs' joints and so on. But no one has ever done this that I could find in a bird, and certainly not in a vulture. So the vulture, I'm a trustee of the Horseman Vulture Conservation Trust, which is based in Wales. We have a very significant collection there. We have 10% of the world's captive population of hooded vultures and 9% of the world's captive population of Egyptian vultures. But we also have a pair of black vultures, European black vultures, Cineris vultures, and Bernard, bless him. And Bernard's really famous because he was the sire of the first, he and Bernadette, Twinkle, his wife's name. They sired the first Cineris vulture hatched in the UK. Anyway, Bernard had previously had a traumatic injury to his left stifle, and last year he found the whole copulation thing really quite challenging. Bearing in mind a male bird's got to get on top and prance around and all the rest of it. And he couldn't manage to stay on top of Twinkle for more than about a minute and a half maximum. And vultures only produce one egg a year. And sadly, the egg was infertile. So we thought, well, what the heck are we going to do about this? And we got in touch with people and talked to people. Anyway, long story short, We did surgery, harvested a fat sample and also a blood sample. We gave a platelet-rich plasma injection into his stifle. And then when the stem cells were grown, we put in 6.7 million stem cells into his left stifle. And now he can copulate quite happily for 8 minutes.
Well, that's fantastic. 8 minutes. Gosh, that's longer.
Oscar, where do we get this?
Now, that's really
so we're really
interesting.
hoping that Bernard and Twinkle are going to have a fertile egg this year. That's what it's all about.
Really good news.
Yeah.
How did you harvest some platelets? Did you use a centrifuge tank?
Yes. Yep.
And did you actually do a cell count on the platelets? Or did you see?
I didn't, but we had some very, very kind people, and I apologize to them because I can't remember the name of the company. But a wonderful company who were very, very supportive, because it was new research work. They actually did it. So economic issues. And they did a fantastic job, and they grew a really good, healthy stem cell line. And as I say, we put 6.7 million stem cells into this joint, and he's a happy bunny. And Twinkle's quite happy too.
Excellent. I still think stem cells are massively underutilized, and platelet-rich plasma. There's a lot more evidence we need to gather.
Yeah.
To work.
It's really funny. If you think back to certainly when I graduated, there were still people, vets of a certain generation who would inject a straightforward blood sample into a stifle, and a fair percentage of them improved to a certain extent. But yeah, I mean, when it's properly done with stem cells, and as you said, the platelet-rich plasma sample, the improvement without doing radical surgery, and we have our radical surgery up the sleeve for Bernard's stifle if we have to, because it's got restricted extension of the stifle joint. That may yet happen, but we thought, well, let's go the non-invasive route first. And let's see the final. We don't know yet whether the egg is fertile, but it's all looking really positive.
This is incredible. So a small injection in the leg of stem cells can increase your copulation time by nearly 400%.
Absolutely, you must try it.
Remember, men, you heard it here first.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
Certificate, CPD,
reflection.
Reflection. Yes. So. Now,
it's not just about sex. It's really about veterinary practice hygiene. That's the important thing.
Oh, right. Okay. What, the reflection question?
Yes.
Oh, I thought the reflection question was going to be, how can you increase your copulation time by 400%?
No, my reflection question is, are you bearing in mind, unless you're measuring it, you can't manage it. Are you confident that your veterinary practice hygiene is adequate?
I'm glad you added the second part of that question, because in relation to the most recent conversation we've had, unless you're measuring it, anyway, yes.
4 1/4 inch. Sorry.
So we're going back. We're going back
to veterinary practice hygiene.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Concentrate, please, Julian.
Unless you're measuring it, I still don't understand why more people aren't doing ATP testing. It's a shame.
I think part of the answer to that is, as veterinary surgeons, we're so used to using microbiology, we just think that microbiology has to be the thing.
Yes.
But the cost of doing 50 microbiology swallows once a month is just totally unrealistic. And if I'm not trying to say that adenosine triphosphate is the be all and end all and should be used everywhere and not microbiology, because of what I would advocate is you use your adenosine triphosphate, and if you get to a situation, and I have not done that yet, but if I find a problem, I can resolve it just by changing how things are cleaned and how people's working practices. But if you get to a situation where you find a problem and you can't resolve it, then you do your microbiology to find out what the bug is, therefore where does it come from and how to manage it. So you can still use the two together. It's not one or the other.
Absolutely. But if you get below 10 on your ATP testing, there's really no need to go on and do individual antimicrobial testing.
And the point is, the ATP is 275 a swab, and the microbiology is considerably more.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Is this a misunderstanding on my part? I wonder, because microbiology for me, we used to test for a particular bug, or we were testing for gram-negative or gram-positive bugs. But surely with microbiology, unless you test for that specific pathogen, then you could miss a whole load of others.
Well, I mean,
But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean,
the traditional way of doing microbiology is you take a swab and you test it at least for aerobic. Sometimes you'll be testing for aerobic and anaerobic, and you'll test for anything that grows. And then the technician will decide actually what is a commensal and doesn't matter, and what is actually a pathogen. There is a move for some people in the hygiene world of saying, okay, well, we're not going to do proper microbiology, but we have this test that will just pick up Pseudomonas or just pick up E. coli, and that's the thing to measure. And I would say no, if you're not, for me, and everyone has their own way to do things. For me, I would say, let's see if the surface is clean. If it's clean, I'm happy. If it's not clean and I can't get it clean, let's then do microbiology and find out what the bug is and where's it come from and how do we manage.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no ATP there, then you're pretty clean. You're unlikely just to get viruses.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you can rule this out. If you got viruses, you're going to have other stuff there.
And the reality is that a lot of disinfectants you'll be using will have an antiviral action anyway. So that, if you're cleaning to a point where you have no bacteria, actually you will be controlling your viruses as well.
Yeah.
right.
Well, I think that deserves a certificate, don't you?
I do.
I think so.
Well, you've got to have something to send to the RCVS for your CPD.
Absolutely. So
So
now,
let's have a look.
bearing in mind that last time we spoke almost solely about birds,
Yes.
I've
With-
predicated my certificate on that. So I've got certificates of birds, vultures, and antimicrobial resistance.
Oh, thank you so much.
So there we go.
Brilliant.
Now, what do we have? We've got a vulture,
Yeah.
we've got a barn owl,
Yeah.
we've got a surgical infection site,
Right.
we've got
Okay.
various interesting birds. Now,
But-
I'll come back to that picture in a minute.
Yes. Quest.
We've got
Bald eagle.
a bald-headed eagle, we've got a duck.
A mallard. And
Mallard.
We've got there's a leucistic robin. So this is a robin that visits us every day. It's got a white head. Very
Wow.
unusual.
Is it actually feathers on the head are white?
Yeah.
Okay. All
So
right.
it's not baldy. And
Yeah.
in the top there, look, there's the biggest gull I've ever seen.
So whilst you're showing a picture of a gull, I just have to give you one figure, and this is a
Yes.
figure from DEFRA, so it must be correct. And remember that avian influenza is brought to the UK predominantly by infected with subclinical gulls and waterfowl. And one poop from an infected gull or waterfowl will create 100,000 infective virus doses, and it will remain viable on the floor for a month.
Wow. That's frightening stuff, isn't it?
But it just means biosecurity has to be really, really good.
Yeah. So getting back to biosecurity and other things, what I
Quest.
we come back
Oh,
to,
no.
these are nests. These
Yeah.
are bird's nest tea.
Wow.
And I was in Thailand a few years back, and there was a shop that had of 1,000 boxes, each
Mhm.
containing a bird's nest.
Oh.
And it's one type of it's a swallow, isn't it? That there's this swallow that produces these nests, and they have bird's nest soup.
Yeah.
And they chop the nests up and put them into tea bags, and you get bird's nest tea bags as well, as a traditional Chinese medicine, aka ineffective way of
But
extincting
it's
a
like
species.
everything else. It's, terrapin soup and pangolins. Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
the injustice this has done to pangolins and bear bile and, all these things are just totally
Yeah.
crazy.
I put it on there really. Please, any listeners who go off to Thailand or any part of Asia where you see these endangered species products being sold, please don't partake in it. Please don't buy them. Don't get swept up by the idea that these wonderful creatures have any magical healing properties, that they're animals trying to make it through life like we are. So don't buy it. Just say no.
And just remember that rhinoceros horn is no different to your toenail. And it's no more magical than your toenail.
Absolutely. And if you need that sort of help, then platelet-rich plasma and stem cells is the way forward.
Absolutely. There we go.
And on that bombshell.
On that bombshell, I think it beholds me to say that if our listeners have enjoyed listening to the show and want to find out more about some of the stuff that Neil's been getting up to and is getting up to, particularly with the Belamos Foundation, then look us up. If you've got any questions, drop us a line and we'll do our best to get back to you with an answer. And if you've got any suggestions, drop us a line. Apart from that one that we received from Martin the other day, and we're not going to do that, Martin, sorry.
No.
So
it's illegal, I think, still in some countries.
I don't care, I'm not going there. So on that happy note, check us out on veterinarramblings.com, and please click like, share, and please subscribe, because it really does make a difference. Neil Forbes, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you again.
Great pleasure to talk about my favourite hobbies.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. And on that note, we normally say may your dog go with you, but I suppose we've got to say may your birds go with you on this one.
May your birds go with you.
May your birds go with you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cut.
Yay!
You were on fire tonight, Neil.
That was brilliant.